Pause for applause. All right, let's kick things off. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm Zach Blumenfeld with CultureCon. Before we get started, I want to give a few shout outs and thank yous. First off, to the CultureCon organizing team. It takes a lot of work to put on these events. So Nick, Katie, Ted, Nate, Logan, Destiny, Lisa, Angela, Rebecca. If you're in the room, please stand up, give a wave. Round of applause. Yeah, without this team, we could not put these events on. Also, we could not put these events on without our partners, our sponsors, Bluetree Network, the QTI Group, and Edgewood College School of Business. Their missions truly align with our mission here at CultureCon. They put their people first, and they make a difference in the community and their organizations as well. So if this is your first event, you're probably wondering why CultureCon, and there's some stats over there on the screen that kind of lead us to this hypothesis that the workplace is broken and it needs to be changed. There's stuff that needs to be fixed. And great culture, intentional culture is what we want and need in the workplace. Culture matters. A lot of folks think it's a quarterly initiative or you check a box and that's good enough. Or they throw a ping pong table in there, or they allow you to bring puppies in the office, and puppies are great, but they're not going to fix your culture. It's making the work we do more meaningful and fulfilling, and the lives of our teams are just more fulfilled in general. There's a lot of great stuff, as you can see from this slide, when you have a great culture in your organization. So our mission statement at CultureCon is to impact the workplace by connecting humans to inspire positive change around organizational culture. And all this is happening here in Madison, and if you know me, you know I love Madison. So we'll always have our annual conference here in the summer, not the winter for obvious reasons, to showcase our beautiful city. This year, we've already had a lot of tickets sold for the upcoming event in July. People are coming in already from 7 different states, 2 different countries, and we'll be releasing our schedule and sponsors in the next few weeks. All this started just a year ago at MiniCultureCon Madison. We had this idea. We wanted to test it out, so we worked with the concourse, and we thought if we could get 50 people in the room, we would be onto something. And we actually had to expand the room size because we had over 100 attendees at MiniCultureCon Madison. So we thought we were onto something. We said, okay, let's try to expand this, and we'll put on a large-scale event. We had no event planning experience, and I think it worked. Besides a few AV problems, it worked pretty well. We had almost 400 culture geeks or attendees at CultureCon 2018 last summer, and it was truly an amazing experience. So over the past year, we've had over 800 culture geeks or attendees at our events. We've put on 10 different events in 3 cities and online as well. And they're working because we're starting to see some changes, and attendees rank on average about a 9 out of 10 overall at these events. So this July, we'll be back bigger and better at the concourse again, July 17th and 18th. Like I said, we'll be announcing our speakers and our schedule in the next few weeks. Tickets are available on our website. And tomorrow, we're actually going to have another event here. So if you're free, come on back to Edgewood. Samantha Slade, all the way from Canada, is going to put on a workshop around her new book, Going Horizontal. We're also going to give away a Culture Geek t-shirt and a ticket to CultureCon. I'm pretty sure everyone on this room except Nick Lombardino is on social media, on Facebook at least. So feel free to tag us, use the hashtag, and we'll pick someone after the event. So before we get started, at every event, we've taken a selfie, and I think this will be either the biggest or second biggest selfie in MiniCultureCon Madison history. So if everyone could kind of get to the center, we'll take a selfie quick. Everyone stand up, move to the center. All right, so in closing, this MiniCultureCon experience, it's unique in that we have an overarching theme. Each one of tonight's speakers will present on topics that will empower us to help build organizational cultures that are grounded in compassion and empathy. Edgewood College was the perfect partner for this event, as compassion is one of their 5 values. With that, it's my privilege to introduce Edgewood College's president, Dr. Scott Flanagan. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Flanagan.
The compassionate thing would be to get that picture down as soon as we can. I had a chance to meet with someone recently, and he said, tell me about Edgewood College. So I started talking about many of the great things that happen at the college. And I don't know if this ever happens to you, but I just got dismissed with a wave. Really? He's like, no, I don't want to hear all that. Why do you exist? I'm like, great, I get the guy who just came from watching the Simon Sinek TED Talk, right? But that's what he wanted. And so I'm sort of on the spot. And I said, to build a more just and compassionate world. And that's what we exist to do. Now, we believe in the power of education, and education of a certain sort, and with certain kinds of educational experiences grounded in the liberal arts and all the rest. But the point is, for us, that education is a means to that end, to help build a more just and compassionate world. And I think one of the things that's so powerful about events like this is that they have to be grounded in the why. And then really what we're talking about is the how, or the environment in which that happens. You know, we can go to strategy sessions and talk about the what like crazy, and the what is really important. For us, I talked about the why, to build a more just and compassionate world, and the how you can see on those banners to the right. Each year we focus on one of those values that we inherit from the Cincinnati Dominican Sisters who sponsor Edgewood College. This year, our focus is on compassion. So when we welcome the freshman class last fall, we talked to them about being the class of compassion. And when we've had lectures on campus, we've used compassion as a point of departure. So when you talk about a fit, I mean, what a great fit when you're going to talk about empathy and compassion that we have the opportunity to host. Actually, you're just like freshmen, but we won't grade you or send you a bill, so it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I was doing some research earlier today and just stumbled across this quote. And again, it's just so fascinating to me how many of these themes run through, but I'm just going to read this to you. This is from Denis Holtschneider, who's the president of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, and Melanie Morey, and they've done some research about Catholic colleges. And here's a quote: organizational cultures, whether religious, athletic, or corporate, are kept vibrant by the energy of a core group within them, who believe the organization's values in their hearts, and who accept their role in motivating others to do the same. And what struck me about that was not only the idea of culture, but they talk about motivating, you talk about inspiring, and again, it's great alignment. The kinds of cultures that you hope to create, the kind of culture that I hope to create, doesn't happen by accident. It happens by purpose, it happens by design, it happens by intentionality. We're grateful to be able to contribute to that conversation. Welcome to Edgewood College. We're thrilled to host you here, and I look forward to taking a bunch of notes, to learning a lot, and having a chance to meet some of you later on this evening. Welcome to Edgewood College.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Flanagan, and we're going to go ahead and get things kicked off now. So it is my distinct honor to introduce our first speaker tonight, Samantha Slade. So for those of you who were at CultureCon last year, CultureCon 2018, Samantha was one of our closing keynote speakers. So we are thrilled to have her back with us. Samantha lives in Canada, so we can say that we have an international reach for MiniCultureCon. So a little bit about Samantha. Samantha Slade is a co-founder of Ecto, a co-working cooperative in her home city of Montreal, Canada, and Percolab, an international co-creation and co-design firm. Samantha is driven by the transition to the future of work. With a background in anthropology and education, Samantha pioneers novel organizational models and practices. Governments, businesses, professional associations, and foundations hire Samantha to help tackle their complex challenges. Recently, she co-created a new competency guide to take the HR profession into its future. Author of Going Horizontal, Creating a Non-Hierarchical Organization, One Practice at a Time, Samantha believes that organizations can be a microcosm of the world we want to live in. Please join me in welcoming Samantha Slade to the stage.
My father was an electrician, an industrial electrician, and a good one, I think, because he did what a lot of people aspire to do in organizations, which is go up the ladder. So he went from servicing electrical units in the factories and companies to selling boiler systems, to becoming the sales manager at a district level, to becoming the sales manager at the national level in Canada. And he was poised to become the general manager of this company in Canada, and he did something that surprised everybody. He quit. He left. And what he did is he went back to a job in sales, and he hung out in sales and a bit of management for another phase of his career. And then he left sales, and he went back to becoming an electrician. 6 months as an electrician, 6 months sailing on a boat. 6 months as an electrician, 6 months sailing on a boat. So it's interesting, I go back and I ask my father, and I say, what was that about? And he was like, I was a terrible manager. And I was like, Dad, how do you know you were a terrible manager? He's like, I just like people to get on with their things. I like to trust people, I like to be curious, all this stuff. But I was told, this is how you need to be a good manager. So you go see your people and you go, I don't care how you used to do things in the past. I don't care how you're going to do things in the future. This is how you are doing things now. And he said, I couldn't do that. It would have broken me to do that. And I preferred to leave. So it's interesting in his story. So I say to my dad, if you had to graph your career with a line, what would that line look like? And my father says, goes like this. I have to get it backwards. He says it starts as an electrician down here, and it goes up towards management, and it comes back down as an electrician. And I say to my dad, that's not what I see. What I see is a really happy, enthused electrician who became a salesperson and a miserable manager way down here, and he finished as a happy electrician on a sailboat. We all have our stories, and we all have our narratives on our stories. This is a little bit what I want to talk about today. But before I jump in, I would like each of us to connect with our stories. So if you have a piece of paper in front of you, or even if you just have a finger or two you want to draw, if you think about your career, no matter how short or long it is up till now, and if you were going to draw one line, what would your line look like? Summarizes your working life thus far. So why don't you just take a moment and draw your line. And then why don't you just turn and show your line to somebody and just see another human being with their story. And so here we go. I'm going to give you my journey. It's really great. It's such a fun thing to do. And what's interesting in it is I didn't talk about what's your x-axis, what's your y, what are your metrics for your line. I mean, this is juicy conversation, right, for yourself. So I did a little take for myself, and I was like, wow, I've worked for 36 years. I hadn't realized it, right? And when I look at my journey, It comes in 3 phases. My first phase is the first 8 years where I'm trying to just figure out what the work world is and doing what I call MIG jobs, which included working at McDonald's, but not only, and also being a student and traveling. I was studying in cultural anthropology, and so trying to just figure out the world and the way it works, right? That's what we do when we start. I moved on, I was a little jaded by my MIC jobs. I moved into public sector, became a teacher, and did like my dad. I rose up and up and up and up until I was all the way at the Ministry of Education. And then I did a little bit like my dad. I left after 16 years. And I started a business. I became an entrepreneur, and that's my last 12 years. And this was really intentional. It was about creating a space where we could really experiment what an organization could be that felt good for us as human beings, and gave results, and did good work, and contributed to the world. Sounded ambitious and simple at the same time. So, and I always came at it from my anthropological lens. And what did I start noticing? I noticed that there's some things that are really amiss in our world, and we saw the stats just now, but I really care about a lot of things. And I notice how much I care about some things and how much they're not working. I care about human beings, and the statistics and organizations around human beings are tragic. We're literally killing ourselves the way the organizations are set up and working today. The statistics are so terrible of mental illness, and even to the point of people killing themselves and committing suicide from the workplace. And we know how tragic it is, and we know it's not a fit with our human nature, and yet we haven't figured out how to shift them. I care about organizations. I care about organizations because I think these are places where we can be collective in solidarity with stability together. That we have social nets that we've created over history that are offered by living in organizational work life. And I think these are places where we learn to live collectively and be with our differences together as well as organizations. And organizations right now are struggling to remain relevant, to actually recruit the great talent. I look at my son, he has a degree in cognitive science from McGill University, and he doesn't want to work in an organization. He's not alone, he's a new statistic. And organizations are missing out, tapping into the new amazing talent of our world, because who wants to go work there? And I care about our world. I care about our world, and I know the complex issues that we have right now, and the needle is not moving. It's not recently we know about these complex issues, it's for decades, and we haven't figured out how to move the needle. And my hypothesis on it is that we're trying to go so far to get something going, and we're forgetting about the world of small steps. And this is a little bit of my theory of change. I'm not alone dreaming of more. There's so many people out there. When I talk to people about these issues and the things we care about, everybody nods their heads and is like, yeah. And I'm like, well, what's wrong? Why are we getting stuck? Why aren't we able to shift the organizations and some things we dream of it wanted to be? Why aren't we able to deal with the complex issues in our world? What's wrong? Why are we getting things stuck? Part of my hypothesis is this, as I say, we go for the big things. We like the structural changes. But if you draw your organizational chart differently, if you flip it upside down, you turn it inside out, you turn it sideways, people turn up Monday morning just the same. They don't change because you've changed a structure on paper. This kind of change that we want to do is deep inside ourselves. And so the kind of change that we need to do has a lot of depth to it. And so to go at it step by step is part of the way. So I say what we need is straightforward, accessible business practices we can implement on Monday morning that can transform us, ourselves, and then around ourselves, slowly into the kind of organizations we would like to be in, that are a match for how we are wired as human beings. This is why I wrote a book. Wrote a book because after all of those years of working, and with my anthropological lens, my educational interest, my entrepreneurial experience, I began to collect the patterns and practices at the micro level, the small step things that are accessible to anybody and everyone that can help us transform into something and grow that makes sense for us all. So I call these business practices that are built on trust and empathy while getting results, because we have some kind of myth we're holding on to that if we shift to ways that feel right and make more sense, we won't get results. That's just not true. And I've seen it for 12 years, internally within our organization, but all around as well. So what is this about? Two things. It's very, very simple. The first is 3 types of practices. So there's 3, looking at practices from a more nuanced level than we actually come at it right now, and 7 domains of practice. So let's just go into these. First of all, it's natural for us to practice. If I say to you, what are you practicing? Can everybody come up with something? I practice yoga, I practice soccer. It's something that we all do in our personal lives. We are practice, and we think about practices. You step into professional life, and we go, I don't practice in professional life. And yet we do. We practice how to do business writing. We practice how to do a quote. We practice how to write a report. These are things that we actually practice to get better at with time. So when we talk about practice, I'm talking about learning over expertise. We value expertise in our world so much that we compromise showing up as humble learners. And if we want to do the types of transformations that our world needs, we need to show up as humble learners. And we need to value the humble learning that we are. Why don't we become experts in learning? So when we talk about practice, means just really doing something, not talking about it, not telling the story about the other person did it, doing it yourself. And then intentionally observing how you did it in its non-perfection, because that's what practice is, and reflecting on it and thinking about how you're going to do it better. And just keep looping that around. And if we look at that as life, then we're somewhere where we can start doing our small steps forward. Can you learn to swim without getting in the water? Not really. So this is what practice is about, getting in. 3 types of practices, and this is where we trip up all the time. When I talk about people at practices, they jump right over to a big trial. They want to go and do, well, I said to my team, we should all start doing this, and they didn't want to do it. And I'm like, of course not. Why would they start doing something when you haven't started small and you start personal, places where you don't need a permission, and you practice for yourself and you build up your muscle, and when you're feeling good about something and you've got some ease and skill and capacity in it, then you move to informal safe spaces, those 2 or 3 colleagues that you hang out with, that you know if you fumble up on something, they're going to be kind to you. That's where you want to go next. Before going to a group and saying, can we collectively agree to try functioning this different way for 2 months, 6 weeks, 3 days, and make a proposal for a short time trial? So if we start looking at it with this nuanced way, we can really create cultural change. So there's no need to wait for permission from hierarchy to start practicing non-hierarchical ways. This is how we are wired to be as human beings, and so we need to figure our pathway back to it. When I talk about practices, there's 7 domains of practice, and I'm just going to introduce them very briefly right now. First is autonomy. If you look about it, all of us get up every day, we figure out what clothes we're going to wear, we get to work, we do our groceries, we buy a house, we get married. We don't need anybody micromanaging us to do that. And yet when we turn up at work, all of a sudden we start doubting our capacity to do all these things, and we begin micromanaging each other, delegating. What about just naming sometimes some criteria and letting people figure things out and self-organize? And if you can stop focusing on other people micromanaging you and maybe start looking about how you yourself are micromanaging people around you, and just start focusing on yourself on that one. But look at the next one. Oh, let me just say something about this one. Autonomy, it's autonomy for yourself and how you're offering it to others. I work in a workplace where I have complete autonomy, and it took me 10 years to figure out that I have the freedom, if I want to be doing a thinking activity, to go take a hammock and hang it on the tree in the park next door. It took me 10 years to give myself that level of freedom. I didn't have a boss stopping it. This is the practice of stepping into our full agency. The second one is purpose. If we can start having purpose as a leader and not a person, things shift. In our life, if I want to go and get a new apartment, the purpose will change how I look at what I'm going to be getting. If it's to be setting up with my new partner or because I'm having a baby, there's different ways of doing it. I will always naturally in my personal life follow purpose as the leader. And when we get to workspace, we forget this. But what if we had as a practice contributing to making purpose explicit and keeping it on track? If it's for a report, a meeting, a project, it doesn't matter, but we share a responsibility on practicing making that explicit and keeping it on track. The next one is meetings. So I always say, look at how it functions in a personal life. You're going to get together and organize a camping trip. You come around a table, you say hello, you smile, you take a while, somebody brings out the paper, you walk through the ideas, and at the end you have an agreement. Nobody chairs it. You don't have a friend who goes, I'm running this meeting now, right? Like we do this so naturally as human beings and we do it really well. You turn up at work and all of a sudden there's one person running it. There's one person documenting it. It's like we've given ourselves all these weird formal structures and yet we can rotate who runs it. We can co-document it together. We can rotate how that happens. We can show up and do a check-in. It helps us be more present. It helps the meeting have more flow, helps get more results. Just get inspired from how it works with your friends. Transparency. We all think we're more transparent than we are, but in our personal lives, like I went to this place, I got this great deal, you should really go, it's not very expensive. Oh, and you got that, how much was that? What did you do for that? We love sharing information. It's helpful for each other. We get to the workplace, what we do. Information is power, shut down, right? But each of us can practice opening up the transparency for ourselves, and then it will grow around ourselves. It's an act of vulnerability and courage to be more transparent in a workplace. Decision making. Think about how you do it in your personal life. You know when to ask advice from others and when not to, when you want to be involved in the decision, when you don't want to be involved. I don't want to decide what we're eating for supper. You take care of that tonight, right? And when we're in work, what do we want to do? Nobody can take a decision without me. I want to be involved in everything, right? It's this big place of contention. How we do that so well and so casually in our personal lives, in a work world, is a big place of complexity. If we could get more intentional about when I need to be involved in a decision, what decisions have been made, and the methods we use for them, and we could start co-managing much more efficiently. Learning and development. Who's got a hobby here? See, you're taking care of your own learning, right? You're not asking permission for somebody to have a hobby. You pick up your hobby, right? And you take care of that and how it grows and what happens with it. You talk about it with your friends, or you create a community, you connect with it. You turn up at work and all of a sudden you're asking permission to do some learning. What? Each of us has agency to self-direct our learning in our workplace beyond what needs to be asked permission for. And we need to remember that all the time. And we can help our colleagues in supporting each other informally in our learning. Relationships and conflict. Something happens for people, we invest in our relational field in our personal life. We celebrate great moments. We take time to have rituals together. When we have conflict, we take time to heal them afterwards. We know about this as human beings. And at work, it's like a taboo topic. We don't talk about relationships. If there's something going on in relationships, you go up the ladder and let that person talk about it. We've disengaged with our own responsibility to tend to the quality of the relationships around us. And each of us can reconnect with that. These are the 7 domains of practice. And each of those, the reason why those 7 domains are there, they're common to all organizations pretty much in every domain of activity. It doesn't matter the size of the organization, where it's situated. They're relevant to all of us no matter what role we have in an organization. It doesn't matter if you're the manager or not. Those 7 domains of practice you can start on Monday morning. And this is why I wrote a book. and it's called the Going Horizontal. And for me, it comes from a really, really deep core belief that the future of organizations is horizontal and human. And that's important not just for organizations, but for human beings and the planet. Thank you.
We've all heard the saying, practice makes perfect, right? So let's start tomorrow and putting some of these in practice. My name is Katie. I am helping with the CultureCon group. I awkwardly made eye contact with Nick, which is why I'm helping with introductions today. So it's okay. It's how it goes. But it really is a pleasure. Thank you all for being here. And we do have some fantastic speakers. So I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, Caleb Campbell. He was actually raised overseas by parents who were devoted to traveling the world for nonprofit work. Caleb Campbell has had a passion for engaging and motivating people from all walks of life for as long as he can remember. He has spent the past 2 decades leading positive change for nonprofit, academic, healthcare, and IT organizations, and is currently Chief of Staff and Culture Guardian at Bluetree Network. Bluetree exists to help healthcare organizations around the country better care for their populations and is equally dedicated to giving back to its own community here in Madison. Caleb moonlights as a motivational speaker and has spoken in over half of our states as well as around the world, and he shared earlier, including places as far as the Samoan Islands. So please join me in welcoming Caleb to the stage.
When I found out we had to select walkout music, first of all, CultureCon taking it to the next level tonight, number one. We got the lights, we got the music. Second, it was a no-brainer for me personally. My wife and I walked out to that song at our wedding reception, so I thought, I got to choose the song. Maybe this gets me good husband points as part of the process. And I mentioned it to her, and she said, oh, that's sweet. So from now on, you hear that song, you're going to think of our wedding or you're going to think of CultureCon. So it didn't go the way I went in my head. There was a family that was visiting a village in the Himalayan mountains. And the 2-year-old daughter got away from the family in a large crowd and fell into a 60-foot deep crevice at the edge of town. Everyone rushed to the scene, and even though they knew where she was, they could not get to her because the opening was so small that an adult could not get there. They brought in a local construction group. They brought in the local police department. They brought in local military. They did everything that they could. For 22 hours, they tried to rescue this girl, and they could not get to where she was. The furthest they could get down was 25 of the 60 feet. It was at that point that a 12-year-old boy named Kamal, whose brother was on one of the work crews, said, you know, I'm a pretty small guy. I'm pretty athletic. I'm a gymnast. I think I could go down and get her. They didn't love the idea, but they were running out of options and running out of time. So they talked him through what he could do. They tied a rope around his waist. They gave him a torch. They gave him a walkie-talkie, and they gave him a backpack. They slowly lowered him down into the hole. Half an hour went by. They heard nothing. And then finally, there was a tug on the rope. They pulled both of them back up. And as you can imagine, he became something of a local hero and local celebrity. In fact, several news outlets interviewed him. One person asked him the question, how does it feel to be a hero? And he said something to the effect of this: I don't know what the big deal is. I saw an opportunity to do something good, so I did it. I love that story for 2 reasons as we get started tonight. First of all, he did something. A lot of times with compassion, which is an amazing theme for this evening, is it not? A lot of times with compassion, we see, we feel, we come together to an event like this, we learn, but we don't always take seeing and feeling and learning and go to doing. He did. And then I love the story because he took the opportunity to do something and to make a difference from where he was. I think sometimes when we think about compassion, we think about these grand things, and I think about foundations that have been formed that raise tens of millions of dollars to do good, or people that go all around the world helping humanity, helping the world become a better place, and those things are amazing. But I love the topics tonight, because tonight we're talking about how you can make an impact for good in the world from right where you are. We're talking about doing good in the workplace. How many people know what this number represents? 90 to 100,000. Anyone want to throw something out? Salary? 90 to 100,000 is the average number of hours that a human being works in their lifetime. To think about it another way, those of us here tonight who are between 18 and 70 years old, we're in a phase of our lives where we're spending 30 to 40% of our waking hours at work. What that means is the people in this world that we are going to spend the most time around outside of those that we live with are people in the workplace. And our greatest sphere of influence to do good may just be where we work. And so I say that to say, yes, join a volunteer organization. Yes, join a national cause. Absolutely, travel the world. Get out there and do what you can. But don't forget to start making a difference right where you are. Number one, we can make a difference from where we are. Number two, you can do that whoever you are. Last year, we launched a diversity and inclusion focus at Bluetree. And we're really young in this journey. Maybe we're to the crawling phase. I don't even think we're to the toddler stumbling running phase yet, but we have positive momentum and we're moving in the right direction. The thing that I'm most proud of with our team as we've launched this focus area as a company is that we have had people from literally across the company who have said, I want to be a part of doing something good. It started with our CEO. So we were laying out our 2018 strategic priorities as a company. He walked into a meeting with our VP group and he said, diversity and inclusion. We haven't done a good job with this in the past. We're going to do a better job going forward. I'm making it a company priority. Go figure it out and make it happen. And then he told the company the same thing. That means something when you hear the leader of an organization say, this is where we're going to stand. And then it involves leaders across different areas of the organization learning new things and devoting themselves to doing different things. But my favorite thing is it involves 30 different people from sales and recruiting and support and operations and delivery, every part of the company, where we did not have to go knock on the door and say, we need your help. We simply said, we think this is important, and they came knocking on the door, and they said, this might not be part of my quote-unquote job, but I want to help Bluetree be a better place. So encouraging. Just a couple of weeks ago, I would never call a person out, but his name is Frank, and he's sitting in the back right there. Everybody turn around. He's wearing a hat. Everybody say, hey, Frank. Hey. Frank, say, hey, everybody. All right, so just a couple of weeks ago, we had a person who was leading one of our focus areas leave Bluetree, and we had this opening, and I mentioned it on one of our calls, and Frank instant messaged me. I think as soon as the call was done, he said, I want in, hook me up. I want to jump in and help. About 10 days went by, and I had not followed up and connected Frank with the right person. Frank's a nice guy, but he sent me an email that basically said, hey man, I said I want to help. You gonna connect me with the right person? We gonna do this thing or what? That's the kind of attitude that we need when it comes to changing our organizations from wherever we are. I transitioned away from a career of preaching about 10 years ago, but it's hard sometimes not to get in that mode. So can I preach for just like 1 minute tonight? Can I just do it for 1 minute? Is that okay? We need executives who will stand in front of their companies and say, this is a priority for us. Who will say, we may be known for many things, but we will be known for doing good in this place. And we need people managers and project leaders and policy developers to say we are going to weave compassion and being good, decent humans into who we are and what we do as an organization. And we need people from all across our teams to say, I don't care where my name is written in an org chart, I'm going to show commitment to doing good and making others do that with me. Change the world from where you are, whoever you are, and do it your way. I heard one time you have to have a picture of children and you have to have a picture of pets in a PowerPoint presentation, and then you're good to go. So there, we've checked both the boxes. Do it your way. The thing about compassion is not out of the box. Compassion in an organization becomes really powerful when it's personal and it's unique to your organization. So sometimes you come to an event like this and it's really easy to hear these things that are working and you try to think, okay, how do I force what we're doing to fit that? But that's not what it's all about. What it's about is learning different ideas and taking small principles that you can weave into the unique fabric of who you are. Like a lot of your organizations at Bluetree, we've always made it a priority to give back to our communities. And one of our team members last year, he had an idea. He said, you know, we're a pretty goofy group of people. I see one of you nodding along, so you've met the team. We're a pretty goofy group of people at Bluetree. He said, why don't we use that to do some good? So at our annual retreat last year, we had what we called a give auction. And what we did is we said anyone in the company can bring an item or a service, and you can auction it off to the rest of the company, and everything that we make will go to organizations that are doing good in the Madison community. We had so much fun. We had baked goods. We had a team member who lives in Hawaii who flew in for the retreat, and she brought chocolates, macadamia nuts. I personally won an auction for 10 bars of soap, handmade soap that smelled amazing. We had the guy on the team that's known for his Red Bull and Diet Mountain Dew and beer diet who's auctioned off doing an hour of physical exercise with whoever won the event. We raised a few $1,000s. We did some good. And I think it was the most popular thing that we've done in the history of the company. Make compassion personal. Do it in a way that works for you where you are. I want to close with 15 minutes goes by really quickly, doesn't it? Maybe not to you. It does up here. I want to close with a story and an assignment. My cousin Abe and I have had several great adventures together through the years. He called me when I was in college. We were both in Indiana, different parts of the state. He said, hey, you doing anything this weekend? I think we should go caving. Sure, I had no idea what it meant, but let's go caving. So we got in a car and we drove for a few hours. We came to a place, we got out of the car, and there's a big rock, and then there's just ground, and then there's a hole that no human being has any business trying to get into. And I'm starting to get a picture of this caving that he's talking about. We went in, and it was so small we had to crawl in on all fours. And not long after that, we had to flip on our backs and do this kind of wiggle for what seemed like 8 hours. It was probably 15 minutes. I asked him the entire time, I said, Abe, is this safe? He said, of course it is. I'm not lying. 3 years after we were there, the cave collapsed and no human being can go in the cave. So I don't trust Cousin Abe. That's part of the moral of the story. But I learned some things that day. I learned, number one, I'm a little bit claustrophobic. Number two, I don't like the sensation of bats flying right past me. But I learned something about darkness that day. I'd heard people talk about darkness that was so thick you could feel it. There was one point when all the lights were off and we were in the belly of the cave and you could not see anything. But I remember he then cracked one of those, you know, the glow Halloween lights. You know what I'm talking about? The glow sticks. I don't even know what they're called, but he cracked one of those. And the entire environment immediately changed. You know where I'm going with this. It does not take much light to make a difference. And so what I would say to you as you hear these other topics tonight is, it's easy to be overwhelmed with, we'll never get there, we can't do all of these things. Let's start small. Let's think about small principles that we can take home with us. Let's think about intentional acts of kindness. Let's think about small things that we can do to make our organizations a better place. And here is your assignment. I'm going to ask you to either take out, it's not clicking, but that's okay. Either take out a piece of paper, or better yet, do you have your phone? Take out your phone. Start an email, okay? Bust out your email app. Nobody's going to get on you for playing on your phone, reading ESPN scores. I think March Madness is happening right now. But get out your phone, start an email to yourself. So it's ZachTheMac@culturecon.com or whatever it is. The title is CC Follow-Up. And I want you to just type down 6 words. One thing, one date, one person. Email yourself that. One thing, one date, one person. What I would ask you to do as you think about this conference next week is take some time and think about just one thing based on tonight that you can do to make your organization a more compassionate place. One thing. Write down one date when you are going to do that one thing by. And then write down one name of someone that you're going to ask to hold you accountable to that. I don't know about you, but I know I am much better to follow through if I have someone else on that journey with me. One thing you can do by one date and one person who is going to help you do it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight, to Zach and the entire team for the great work that you're doing, and for all of you for trying to make your organizations a better place. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Caleb. That was fantastic. So I have the distinct honor of introducing somebody who's had a profound impact on my personal and professional life. His name is Dr. Denis Collins. As a student of Edgewood College, Denis was my business ethics teacher, both in undergrad and graduate school. And you'll soon find out why he's left such an impact in my life and in the greater Madison community. A little bit about Denis. Denis is a pragmatic idealist and a professor of business at Edgewood College, where he teaches classes in management and business ethics. He's been advocating for socially responsible organizations since his supermarket managing days, and upon getting his PhD in business administration from the University of Pittsburgh in 1990. His latest books, Business Ethics, Best Practices for Designing and Managing Ethical Organizations, and Essentials in Business Ethics, Creating an Organization of High Integrity and Superior Performance, provide practical how-to examples and best practices on every area of managing ethics inside organizations. His almost finished current book is about what to do after implementing all the best practices in business ethics and employees are still not behaving well. Denis has also won several teaching and service awards and has survived life-threatening cancer a few times. Please join me in welcoming Denis Collins to the stage.
Raise your hand. Or flip my next side. How many of you would like to eliminate just the compassionate world? Raise your own hand. We all want that deep inside. We're looking for the ideal, we're looking to experience the ideal. But what is it that we see every day in these papers? Kind of see just the opposite. Granted, these are exceptions to the rules, but every day, this is just from a month ago. But every month, every day, there's new things going on. The latest exhibiting a lack of compassion. The latest is the scandal amongst colleges where the coach is getting paid. That's not fair. That's not being compassionate to people that are trying hard to get into colleges. So we see this happening. But these things have been happening for a very, very long time. Is that better? Now, is that better? Yes. I heard myself. So we see this going on all the time. It's nothing new, though. It's always been like this. We've always lived in a world that exemplifies this. Think back to your first jobs you ever had. How compassionate were the people in the first companies you worked for? So my first organization I worked for was Grand Union Supermarkets in New Jersey. How many of you have ever weighed the bananas when you got home from a supermarket? None of you. And guess what? We know that as supermarket managers. And we also know that if we get 3 bad inventories, we're fired. So guess what we did at Grand Union Supermarkets? We tipped the scales in our direction, and then we bribed through money government officials to tell us when we were going to be inspected so we could fix the scales when the inspectors came by. And then we tipped them again. And we had abusive bosses. And the employees got even with the abusive bosses by stealing. I thought, well, that's the supermarket industry. So I flipped totally, and I became a missionary. I thought that would be better. Those are nicer people to hang around with. And after a little while, not so. There were leaders of the church that were very abusive, that were uncaring, but these were supposedly the good folks. Maybe after 5 years, I need to shift again and go to nonprofits, because those are good-hearted people. I went to an economic think tank, served as a research assistant, and they were lying to each other, and they were misrepresenting their results. And these are good folks. And it just made me wonder, why is it that good people, really good people, generally speaking, do bad things when they're working? And what is that all about? So I scratched my head and decided, well, I need to study this, because it's a huge, huge issue. And in my studying, I ended up getting a PhD in business ethics, which you can't do in too many places, but I managed to pull that off at the University of Pittsburgh. And then my challenge was, I've got my captured audience. You folks are my captured audience today. But then it was MBA students. I'm trained to teach MBA students. And I came up with my model on what to do. And this has been in my last couple books. So if you want to create an ethical organization, things that you can do very clearly is start off by hiring ethical people. That's a no-brainer. But a lot of organizations don't do that and don't use that as a screen. They only use it as a skill. After you hire ethical people, introduce them to your code of ethics. Here's how we expect for you to behave. These are the norms. After that, teach them how to make ethical decisions. From there, do ethics training, do diversity training, teach people how to respect one another, do ethics reporting, help people become ethical leaders. You're part of an ecosystem, be an environmental best practices, be a good corporate citizen, and assess all this. And so this is the model I've been using, and I use this in teaching my MBA classes here at Edgewood College when I do consulting with organizations and workshops. And each box has about 6 to 10 best practices. These are the best practices for doing these kinds of things. And my students come back and the organizations come back, and what they tell me is, yes, when you do these things, believe it or not, it works. Isn't that shocking? So if you're intentional about this, we can, by doing these best practices, we can minimize unethical behaviors. We maximize ethical behaviors, but you know what? You folks are still a pain in the neck to work with. And so am I. We have our quirks. How many of you are morally perfect? Please levitate. Please levitate. None of you are, and I'm not either. I screw up all the time. How many of you have ever told a lie? Time to exercise again. Right? We all do. We all do. Research says the average person lies once or twice every day. Now, that might sound bad, but that also means if you flip it, 99% of the time we're honest folks, right? We're not in jail, right? We're not in jail. So we're generally honest people, but not all the time. And at what point during the day are you going to tell your 1 or 2 lies? And if you didn't tell a lie today, then somebody told, and if none of us did, then somebody lied 100 times for us today. And you can kind of guess who they might be going that way. So lying is a particularly big issue to deal with. When do people first begin to lie? You parents in the audience. Who's a parent? When did your kids first start lying? As soon as they could talk, those little buggers. As soon as they could talk. Hey, Seth, did you poop in your diaper? Looks me in the eye. No, Dad. Come on, I could smell it. I could smell it. Why is he lying to me? Where did he learn that from? Kind of hardwired. He wants to be happy. He's playing with his Legos. He's enjoying himself. He knows the answer I want to hear so that he can get what he wants, which is to play with the Legos. He knows in his mind, anytime he tells me he has a soiled diaper, I take him away from his toys. I carry him upstairs. I hold him by his feet. I strip him naked. I get a wet wipe. Not a good experience. And the worst thing is, I put him down for a nap, which is really bad for him. He's a spirited kid, didn't want that at all. And then we grow up. We know what the boss wants to hear, so therefore, how honest and how truthful are we at work? How compassionate are we at work in doing this? And that leads to then character development. So you can do all the best practices you want, but people are still people. So can we spend time at work? Caleb mentioned all the hours we're spending at work. Can we spend a little bit of that time doing character development at the workplace? Can we pull that off? Well, currently, how do we help people evolve? And once again, I'm speaking as a cancer survivor, so I'm taking this step back to say, what is this life all about? What is this? What are we doing every day? And how is our life? How are we directing our life? So some of the character development stuff we inherit from our parents. And there's neat research, maybe compassion is inherited. Compassionate kids have compassionate parents. How much is that inherited? We're not quite sure, but research is looking at that. But for the most part, we learn from our environments. We learn from our parents. We learn from our brothers and our sisters and our friends about what's right and what's wrong. Our parents say, this is what's right, this is what's wrong. Our siblings say just the opposite. What mom and dad said is right, that's really wrong. And what they say is wrong is really right. We get conflicting messages. We join neighborhood gangs, and they tell us what's right or what's wrong. We join the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and they tell us what's right or what's wrong. We join sports teams, and our managers tell us what's right or what's wrong. And then we turn 18, and we go to work, and all of a sudden, God forbid, don't talk about character development at work. We can't talk about that, and we can't talk about ethics, of course, because that's just, there's no place for that at work. And there's something weird about that. There's something really weird because of all the hours they're spending at the workplace, as was mentioned earlier. So what do we do about this, and how can we handle this? So in writing about this, I'm trying to make it easy for organizations to do this. And I'm beginning off with core values. Right now, many organizations have core values. And that's character development. Edgewood College, compassion. We have partnership, truth, community, and justice. Those are our core values at Edgewood College, and we try to organize around that. So that's character development. So we're already doing that. Similarly, performance appraisals. That's character development. This is good behaviors, and these are bad behaviors. So whether we say we do character development or not at work, we are doing that. So that's not very radical. And then I'm wondering, is there a deeper analysis of this on how we're doing character development? And as is the case, as I'm in the doctor's office, waiting to kill some time for more MRIs or more CAT scans, and I'm wondering, how can I make this simple for managers to get? And I hear the receptionist say on the telephone, "Thank you for calling. I'm very busy right now. I'm going to put you on hold." And she gets the phone again. "Thank you for calling. I'm going to have to put you on hold." And then when she takes somebody off hold, what does she say? She apologizes. That's character development. We don't call it that, but she's been trained, or it comes natural to her, to say thank you for calling and to apologize. That's a very natural human attribute. And then I got to go to the restroom, and I'm in the bathroom, and there's that sign. Employees must wash their hands. Well, what's that? That's character development. We don't call it that. We call that the law, right? That's the law, but nonetheless, that's character development. So we already do a lot of character development, but we don't quite call it that way. So then my curiosity is, how much more can we do? And there's a lot more. There's a lot more that we can do. And all these things, and so these are different chapters of the book that I'm playing around with. And I'm writing it with my son, who's a millennial. I'm getting the millennial perspective on this. I'm here to pass the baton over to my young kid. All these things I've tried, done in organizations, Edgewood College, with my students, to experiment, and they all work. They all work, and people love it. And just to give you a little feel for it, core value circles. I did this at Edgewood College. We did this for 3 years. 6 or 8 employees, we got together. We had about 4 or 5 different teams. We took these 5 values. We met once a month. And we said, let's talk about truth. Well, let's talk about compassion this month. So if we did compassion, the last 30 days, when did you exhibit compassion to a student, the customer, or to an employee? When did you do that? And we would tell stories about that. And we would praise each other for our good behaviors, because we're not used to talking this way. And then, when weren't you compassionate? When did you get really angry and act out? Can we talk about that? Oh, well, hold on a second. No, can we talk about that? And we did. Well, how can we support each other so that when you get angry, you act more compassionately and create that kind of a buddy system? So we created these character development partners and a buddy system to help each other out. And that's been mentioned by a previous speaker. And then each month, so what's being done is 1 hour a month, just 1 hour out of those 100,000 hours you're working your whole life, can we put aside 1 hour at work and talk about issues at work? So we're not talking about outside of work, things you're doing at work in terms of these values. So let's talk about traits we inherited, your personality. At work, are you an extrovert or an introvert, and how does that help? What are your emotional styles? Your drive for independence. How are you independent at work? And then how are you dependent at work? And are you happy with that? Are you happy at work, or are you unhappy at work? At work, do you self-actualize, or do you not self-actualize? And what can you do? And how can we support each other? Are there drama triangles going on at work? And what's your role in this drama triangle, and what can you do about that? Let's talk about ethic reasoning. When are you an egoist? When do you do unto others as you want done to you? What are your virtues? What are your vices? Can we talk about your virtues and your vices this month? Talk about serving others, giving and receiving, life stages, 8-fold paths. So these are all different activities that we can do at the workplace regarding work itself. And we're helping each other out, becoming better people while we're engaged in work. Here's some of the exercises we're playing around with. And I pulled up the one on compassion since that's the theme of this conference, which is wonderful. And these are the kinds of questions you can ask each other in small groups or with your partners. During your childhood, did your parents express compassion because we're learning from our parents? Those are our role models. How compassionate were your parents? Were they compassionate to the strangers, or did they ignore that? Because we're the outcome of the things that precede us. Now describe a situation where you happened while it was at work, and were you compassionate to the situation that occurred? Was somebody compassionate to you? Did they reach out to you? How did that make you feel? Tell stories. Tell stories about this. And if you weren't compassionate, next time, how could you become more compassionate? And how could you deal with it? Why weren't you compassionate? You're working with somebody, they needed help. They asked you for your help, and you said, get lost. Why did you do that? How do you feel about that? How can we reach out and help you? Similar with a vice such as anger. Can we talk about the times we get anger? For the Dalai Lama, that's the number one issue in life that we need to deal with is our anger and our tendency to get angry. And we're just responding to the situations that before us, usually in a non-thoughtful way. So these are hardwired in our brain, our responses that we have, and we're trying to see, how do we normally respond? Can we pause for a moment and change our behaviors and work on it? It's really hard to do, but can we have a partner to back us up? To say, hey, I think you kind of got mean and nasty with your coworker today. I think maybe you need to have a cup of coffee and talk things over. So these are just different kinds of examples on what you can talk about. And examples are being played out in all these to help you become a better person. And you're becoming a better person when you're working. And it's good to do because you never know when your time is running out. So in my mind, how many of you have had cancer? Raise your hand. Give these folks a hand. Give these folks, they've survived. Okay. Cancer is unlike anything else because it's death. I mean, it's the greatest fear. It's the greatest fear. So back in 95, I had stage 3 Hodgkin's disease going on stage 4. And in January of 96, they said, in the summer, Denis, you're going to be dead. We're going to try the best we can to save you. We're going to give you 8 different chemo drugs, and we're going to make you really sick. And you've already had 6 months of chemo. Nothing's worked yet. But we're just going to go through this. We're going to go through this. And it worked. Bless their hearts. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But as a result of that, in my mind at that point, I thought, I should be dead. You know, I was supposed to die, and I survived. There are people that are supposed to survive. You have a class of people that go through chemo together, and some of them didn't make it. Simply luck and drugs and maybe good attitudes, and there's books on radical remissions and all that kind of stuff. But it was, well, these are my bonus days, and what do I want to do with my bonus days? You know, I want to make the world a better place. I want to create ethical organizations because life is short and sweet. So you could have died too. Life is extremely fickle. It's extremely fickle. We all have had near-death experiences. We've all had a chance. You could have been run over by a taxi. You could have been run over by a bus. You could have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And a lot of people get in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then they wonder, when I was in the hospital, I would talk to people, and the people that were content with dying lived a good life. The people that weren't happy when they reflected on their life, and when you're on death's bed, you reflect on your life, they did a lot of bad things. They were good people, but they had a lot of regrets and resentments about their own life. So make believe a plane almost just crashed on us right now. We all survived. And now what are you going to do with your life? Create compassion at the workplace. And I wish you well in doing that. Thank you for your time.
All right, bonus days, guys. That's what we're going to take away from that one. Is anyone else excited to hear Annette's walk-up song? final one of the day. I'm pretty excited about it. Annette Miller's professional experience has created an individual who seeks to make a difference every day with intention. Her passion is ensuring inclusion and engagement is front and center in her work. She has strong policy and analytic skills, a wide network of community, government, and business relationships, and extensive networks and relationships within Madison and Dane County's diverse populations. A key strength of hers is a connector between community, business, and nonprofits, which she believes results in developing and implementing ideas and strategies that are inclusive and resilient to produce a stronger community backbone. Please join me in welcoming our final speaker, Annette Miller.
Nothing like a little bit of respect, right? So I've been thinking a lot about tonight and what I want to share about what it takes to create a culturally inclusive community. And one of the first things I want to tell you is that when I say that, I want you to understand that you are community, that you embody community, I embody community, we embody community. So that is very important for you to understand. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put this chair out here, because if I do this right, it's not going to be about me, but it's going to be about this chair. And you'll understand more why later, but this chair is really important. It's not only important for me, but I hope by the end of this talk, it'll be important for you too. So first and foremost, what you need to understand that when it comes to trying to create inclusive community, we have a history, we have a story, we have an identity that we are wrestling with, that we have come to understand about ourselves. We don't love it, but it's true and it's real, and it's who we are as people, as community, as individuals. And it is made up of race, it's made up of class, it's made up of power, it's made up of economics, it's made up of who can be, who can't be, who should be. It's been embedded in systems, it's been embedded in structures, it's been put into policy, it's been put into practice, and we consume it every day. When we watch TV, when we look at our phones, we are consuming, and we're believing and believing. And so all of a sudden, we're supposed to miraculously understand what it means to be inclusive, what it means to understand culture, what it means to understand me, what it means to understand you, what it means to understand us. And I contextualize that to say that's here in the United States, that is the context, the United States. The United States has this history about people, how they got here, and how they've lived here. And what's powerful for us all to understand is that when we're frustrated and when we are trying to figure out why or how, we have to understand that we are working with a system that was inherited, a system that sometimes and often we don't understand. And so part of the work is understanding that there is a story that we all need to own, and that there's also a future that we all believe in and also have a part in creating. So our history does not have to be our future. Our history is what it is, our history. And it's important to understand it, because if you don't understand your history, then how can you make today and tomorrow something more? Because this is our building blocks. So in thinking about that history and thinking about how we got to today, it has been by design. We've all designed it. Our ancestors have designed it. Companies have designed it. People have designed it. And what I decided in my own journey, and when I think about what I care about and what I'm passionate about, I've decided I want to redesign the design. I want the design to include me. I want the design to reflect me, and not just me, you, we, us, them, zers. I want it to include all of us, but all of us in a way that's authentic, in a way that really reflects who I am, who you are, and who we are together when we open ourselves up to allow each other to be together, to connect together, to be together, to live together. And so I started this business called Equity by Design. And part of what got me into this work is that I'm mixed. My mother is German. All of my family lives in Germany. And my mother and my grandfather and my grandparents grew up in a time that has its own story, and it's not a pretty story either. And then I have this father who grew up and was born and raised in the South in Kentucky. And so I have this really interesting heritage. I have this German heritage that's very real and present in my life, and I have this African and African-American history in my life that's very real and present too. So it's very hard to feel like you belong when you have people telling you that you don't. And so I've always been thinking about, how do I belong? How do I fit in? And how did these two people meet? Military, thank you for your service. They met through the military. And I'm glad they did, because I wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't be here today doing the work that I love. And the work that I love is that I believe in us, I believe in me, I believe in what it means to create inclusion. I believe in what it means to break down inequity. I believe in what it means to be diverse in its most fullest sense, because I've lived a very diverse life. Having grown up for half of my life, back then when I was younger, so for the first 10 years of my life, I grew up in the military, and I lived lots of different places, and I heard different languages and tried different food, and I met different people, and always trying to figure out, how do I fit in? How do I belong? And then when I became an adult, I realized that I was still practicing that, and I was still living that, and I was believing it, but now I was starting to build bridges, because I started to understand sometimes why I didn't fit. And I started to understand how I could make it easier and what could be different. So I started talking to people, I started looking at policy, I started looking at systems, and I started looking at culture and looking at organizations, and I started understanding why maybe I didn't fit. And the reason I didn't fit is because it wasn't designed for me. It was designed for somebody else. And so constantly I was trying to figure out how I could change myself so that I could fit. And I got tired. I didn't want to change myself. I like who I am. I'm a good person. So instead of trying to change myself, I think I'd like to change the system. And so that's what I've been doing, is changing the system, one day at a time, one person at a time, one organization at a time. And I've had the good fortune to do it in this community, and do it with other people who believe in equity and inclusion and in community like I do. And so this business and this work, which is a business, but really isn't, it's just my personal calling, is about bridge building. It's about culture. It's about connection. It's about helping people understand that if we were willing to understand our culture, if we were open to really thinking about who we really are as people, it truly is accurate that when you get to know somebody, it is so amazing how much you have in common than you don't. But we spend too much time thinking about what we don't have in common rather than what we do have in common, and thinking about the order and the sequence of how we make those things common. There's so much in that. And that's why I'm really excited about this topic of compassion, because in order to create inclusive communities, you have to have compassion. You have to be willing to open yourself up and be vulnerable and be willing to try something new, try something different, be different, live different, think different, and welcome people in, and also be compassionate with yourself when sometimes you just don't get it right the first time, but you're ready to get it right the second time. So I brought this up because M&Ms, they're all different flavors and colors of M&Ms in the bag, and this is who we really are. And we look different, we are different, and we embody so many different things. But the problem is that red is always making the decision. And red's making the decisions for everybody. And that's where I think the change needs to come from, is that red needs to understand that they are not the only person who should be making the decisions. Red should not be making the decisions for all of us. Red can make some decisions, but it would be great if red would include the rest of us, because red doesn't know what the rest of us want. But red can ask and invite and ensure we're at the table so that we can understand what it is I want, or we want, or they want, or this community wants. But you've got to ask. But first and foremost, red needs to understand that there's more than just themselves, that there's more on the line than just the I or the me, that there's actually a we. And red needs to figure out how to be more inclusive and more welcoming in terms of understanding that there's more in that bag than just the reds. So here's my analogy. I feel like this is sort of our life, is that everybody's in the boat, but some people don't realize they're in the boat. And if they do realize they're in the boat, they're like, wow, glad I'm not them. And it's like, yeah, but the boat is sinking, and yeah, the boat's in the water. You might not be wet, but you're gonna be. And you're gonna sink together if you keep thinking that just because you're not wet, that everything's okay. And that's what we've been doing. We think that just because we're not wet, that we're okay. But you're forgetting that we're all in the same boat and we're all on the same body of water. And so if there's a hole, we all have a responsibility to fix it, not just the two people who are at the end of the boat where the hole is, right? So it's about cultural consciousness, and it's about inclusive decision making. If you start thinking about who you are and how you fit into the system of things, into the organizations of things, you'll realize that it isn't just about you, it is about the we. And part of that thinking is really thinking about the table and the chairs. A lot of times we find ourselves so often in the room making decisions, and we know that not everybody's in the room. But we go ahead and we make those decisions anyway, right? And the reality is, who said that you couldn't add more tables into the room? Who said you couldn't add more chairs to the table? Who said that? And so earlier in a different presentation, we were talking about personal agency. We have personal agency to open it up. We have personal agency to bring more tables into the room, to bring more chairs into the room. You don't have to just be silent and watch it happen. You can be a part of being that change that you want to see, that you believe needs to happen. And that's how you start creating inclusive communities, organizations, neighborhoods, and just personal space. You do that by starting to think, who's not in the room? Who else should be in this room when we're trying to make decisions around who we hire, who we fire, who we say is doing great, how we think about policy in terms of where we live, where others live. When we talk about money, how that money works and who it works for, those are really important decisions. And we think for some reason that, other people have got it. And the reality is they don't. We all need to be actively practicing how we create inclusion. I love what Samantha said earlier, because we all need to be a part of the solution and get in. There isn't this hierarchy. Change doesn't happen in a hierarchy. Change happens because we see something that needs fixing and we say, I want to be a part of that fix. And so this is how it works. It's bringing those tables into the room. It's bringing those chairs into the room. And it's also acknowledging and knowing that there's something missing, that there's a voice missing, that there are some things that aren't getting decided, and we don't have the right voices in the room to help make that decision. And also understanding that we don't have the capacity to be able to figure it out on our own. We absolutely should welcome and open the doors to bringing other people in to help fix it, to help change it, to help make it better. So Rihanna, who is a singer. She started her own line of foundations. And so basically she created 40 shades of foundation, not 50 shades of gray, right? 40 shades of foundation of color, from the lightest, palest to the darkest, most chocolatest. And she is one of the few who said, I want to make a line of makeup that includes everybody, not just somebody's and just a few somebody's. Most of the beauty lines only make 6 or 10 colors. This is 40. Think about how many people are so happy about this. And it's so simple. She added 30 more. And you probably could even add some more shades if you wanted to. But this was such a simple act. And that is what it takes. It's a simple act of thinking, of being aware, of being mindful of the decisions that we're making and of the way in which we do this work, really understanding who else, how else should be a part of this conversation. Me personally, just for cultural context, this is Leave It to Beaver. For some of you younger folks in the room, this was a show that used to be on TV that basically people consumed. It was about the heterosexual family, husband and wife, with their kids, with their dog and a cat, white picket fence, homeowner. The wife's at home, making sure dinner's ready, always there for their kids whenever there was a problem. The husband's bringing home the bacon, right? We've been playing that narrative for so long. And when you think about that today and right now, maybe even in your own life, is that even real? Is that really what your family looks like? And is that even how you would identify family? There are so many people who get left out in that narrative, and that is a narrative we have been consuming for decades. And there are people who really believe that that's what life looks like. And that is absolutely what life does not look like. It is so much richer, it's so much broader, it's so much more interesting than this. And so I purposefully chose this picture because personally, we need to say bye-bye, okay? Because this was yesterday. It's not today, it hasn't been today for a long time, and it's not our future. And part of the angst and the anger that you see from people is this frustration of consuming lies about who people want us to believe they are when they're not. This isn't really us. This is us. We're so beautiful. We are so fucking beautiful. And this is what we miss every day. I do this work because I see this every day. And I think you are not being compassionate if you can't see that, if you don't have that in your life. I live in this community and I live this every day. And I have to listen to people go, diversity? We don't have people of color. I don't know where to find them. Every day, I see it, I live it, I breathe it. I talk, I interact, I exchange every day. If you don't see it, it's because you have blinders on. You don't know how to look. You don't know how to see. And I'm not mad. I'm not mad. I'm just saying, you're missing out on a whole lot. Because this kind of diversity makes life beautiful in ways that you can't even imagine, because you can't even imagine. So in order to get to that vision, to this vision, there's some things that we can do. And first is really being intentional about the work that you do and really thinking about, again, who's in the room, who's not in the room, and why. There is a reason why they're not in the room. There is something wrong with the process, with the policy, with the system. The people are there. So it's not the people's fault, it's the system's fault. Now, understand what I said, it's the system's fault. But systems are made up of policies. Policies made by people, of which people make sure they stay intact. So we have to be the ones to make the change. We have to be looking, watching, and aware and intentional in making sure that we think about how we help do our part to make the change. And we can in really small ways. I'm not asking you to be Superman, Superwoman, super they. I'm just asking you to be you. And you can do it in your own personal agency by normalizing and understanding that if you don't see diversity in where you are, then how can you do your part to be more accountable to make it happen? Thinking about, earlier it talked about active learning, active practice. Absolutely. Build capacity. Nobody comes into this knowing how to do it. Obviously we don't. So own that, lean into that, and start thinking about how you can build capacity, how you can partner. You shouldn't do it alone. You should do it with other people. How can you identify tools that can help you make that happen, whether it's third party or bringing in experts to help you make it happen? But it does start with yourself. Thinking about your own biases, thinking about the things that you are afraid of, the things that you fear, and thinking about how do you move beyond that and think differently and open up differently and be willing to practice in a different space to be different. And that's part of knowing your growth edges. And when you know where your growth edges are, then that's when you reach out to other people and you acknowledge that I have some growth edges here and I need some help. I'm really trying to understand how I can do this. And here's the thing about people, we love helping each other. We do. All you need to do is ask. All you need to do is ask, but you have to be willing to be vulnerable to do that. So being intentional in the work and in the design of the work, so understanding your own system, understanding your own policies, understanding your own practices, and really trying to figure out where you see the gaps in those. And if you can't see the gaps, asking others to help you see them, because they'll help you see them. You just have to ask. And then really thinking about what's our goal? What are we going to try to change? What are we going to try to disrupt? What are we going to do to be better? Building the capacity, not only of yourself, but of others, and having a vision for that. And then really understanding that professional development is key. As I come down to the finish line, one of the resources I wanted to share with you is Fake Equity. It's a Fake Equity pledge. It's at fakeequity.com, and I'll walk you through it. So talk with no action. If I hear one more time somebody talking about diversity and actually doing nothing about it and showing me their intellectual prowess about diversity, but they never do anything to change what their organization looks like or how their friendship groups or anything, then you're just talking. You're just talking. And I don't want to hear you talk anymore. I don't. That's talk with no action. Potlucks and fake community engagement. I think it's really great to try different foods. Asian food is great, Mexican food is great, German food is awesome. But that didn't change a system, that didn't change a policy, that didn't change a process. All we did is eat, and I probably gained 10 pounds just from doing that. So we gained weight, but we didn't change the system, right? Forks and chopsticks. Forks and chopsticks is when you go to somebody else's house and you bring your fork when everyone else is eating with chopsticks. Because you're saying, oh, well, I'm willing to have the experience, but I'm gonna use my fork, thank you very much. I'm too embarrassed, or I don't know how to use the chopsticks. That makes me feel uncomfortable. Well, I'm uncomfortable every day. So I want you to be uncomfortable too. I'm not here to make fun of you. I'm not here, this isn't a comedy show. This is culture. This is their lifestyle. This is how they do things. So pick up the chopsticks, use them. You might be surprised at how good you are at using them if you try. Leave your fork behind. All talk, no listen. All talk, no listen is you talk about it, you've even done some things about it, but you're mainly just talking about it, and you're talking so much that you're not listening to the people who can actually help you understand where the changes need to happen and what needs to be done to disrupt the system so that we can make the change. but we're doing a lot of talking, and there's a lot of awareness, and there's a lot of knowledge, but it's still a lot of talking and not enough listening. Because ultimately, talking is great, but we are perfectly imperfect, and we only know so much. You can't know another person's life experience. You can't understand the barriers that a person might be experiencing in the system, in the policy, in the procedure. I'll use myself. I'm working at a beautiful place, and I don't even realize as a heterosexual married woman that someone who works with me doesn't get the same benefits as I do because they have a same-sex partner. I just assumed that they got the same kind of benefits that I did. I had no idea. So I know that's happened to you all. Happened to me too. That's talking and not listening and not really understanding that maybe someone else's life isn't exactly happening the way that you think it is because you're too busy talking and not really listening to understand what is really happening in their life and how is it different than yours, and where are there opportunities to be more inclusive and make sure that those benefits are for all and not just for some. Equity Brave. Equity Brave is like that red chair in that earlier picture at the table. It means that that person is knowledgeable and skilled at deconstructing systemic barriers. They understand what inequity is. They understand what diversity is and inclusion, and they are doing their part to build bridges, to make change. But they don't want to give up their chair because they really want to be in the middle of it because they are so passionate about the work, but they have to be a part of it. They can't not be a part of it. They want to be in the room too. The only way they're willing to do the work is if they can be a part of it too. And so that's really great because this person is doing the work. They are breaking down doors, they're opening doors, they're building bridges. But part of the problem with that is that sometimes you shouldn't be in the room and you can't be in the room because it isn't about you. It's about equity, it's about inclusion, it's about other perspectives, other lifestyles. But most importantly, it's about if you are doing the work well, if you have really built a sustainable system of creating inclusion, you don't need to be in the room. You've really done your work. When you are not in the room and you've given up your chair and equity is happening and you're not there because you did do due diligence, you did break down systems, you did break and change policies, you did really think about listening and understanding about other people's perspectives about what it means to represent and reflect all of who we are as humans. And you don't need to be in the room because you have created champions. And that's why that chair is important. Because the work should be about not being in the room, but actually not being in the room. And the work is happening. Because then our future doesn't look like our history. It looks like that picture that I showed a while ago that won't come back up. But you saw it. That got me teared up a little bit. That our future looks like that when we're able to ensure that we build systems and we deconstruct systems that hold people back. Oh, you know what? It actually, now I realize, no, it doesn't really work. Stop. Oh, there it is. So here's the other thing. As you can tell, I really believe in breaking down systems, and I really believe in creating equity and inclusion. But I also know that this work requires a lot of compassion. Because even though it's been historically been by design, I know that each and every one of you, and even me, we didn't do it intentionally to be malicious or bad or horrible people. And so compassion is important because we have to be willing to allow ourselves to fall down so that we can pick ourselves back up, because we know when we get back up, that's where the real power is. We didn't stay on the ground. We got back up and we said, you know what? That is his story, but I'm trying to make her story. I'm trying to make a future story, a different story, and I want to be a part of it. And it's not about what happened, it's about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and understanding that each and every one of us has the power, has the capacity to do this ourselves. And so we have to be gentle and have compassion and understand that we don't know, but what we do have an obligation is to know and understand that we can be a part of the change that we want to see. And so love yourself, love others, and really think about the ways in which, as you move forward, you can make opportunity that is more inclusive and more about we and not just about the sum. Thank you. Thanks. All right, thanks. Where'd I put my bag?
Well, thank you, Annette. What a wonderful way to end tonight's MiniCultureCon. So let's just do one final round of applause for all tonight's amazing speakers. And a big shout out and thank you to our partners for this evening. Again, that's our presenting sponsor, Bluetree Network, supporting sponsor, QTI, and our gracious hosts in Edgewood College. One more round of applause. So this is going to feel just a little bit rushed. We have a reception in the building just across the way here that goes until 8. So I want to make sure we get enough time to have food and have drink. Just a few housekeeping items. So Zach called out in the beginning of the presentation that we're going to be doing a social media contest. So for those of you that were tweeting and tagging CultureCon during tonight's forum, we're going to announce the winner of that tomorrow, likely on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So the winner of that will get a free Culture Geek t-shirt, and then also a free ticket to CultureCon this summer. That's July 17th and 18th. And then also a plug for tomorrow's Going Horizontal workshop. So Samantha Slade, our first speaker, is doing a workshop discussing her book, Going Horizontal. So we still have tickets available on our website. So if that's something you're interested in, please jump on and get your tickets this evening. And then finally, for those of you who are CultureCon volunteers and organizers, can you raise your hand really quickly? Okay, look around the room and see who these people are that are raising their hands. So these individuals will help usher us to Washburn Heritage Room, which is just across the parking lot. So let's plan on meeting in the same area where we registered, the front atrium, then we can all walk over there together. So just, again, a big thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your personal lives to be with us tonight. We'll see you next one.